hope you're doing marvelously well. In this episode, we're going to talk about something which isn't that glamorous, but is incredibly important. And that is these things. Stands, he says, smashing into another stand. So we're going to talk about stands. And of course, there will be a cheat sheet down below, which will give you some ideas of what stands you might need in your particular studio setup. And it's a good opportunity to get hold of Mike over at Sweetwater and choose some things to buy, but also understand, understand, I like that. Also understand why we would choose a particular stand. What would you need in a home studio environment? So without further ado, I do actually have Mike on the call here. Hey, Mike, how was that? Was that a good enough intro?
Hey, Warren. Yeah, no, you're right. The stands and cables aren't necessarily the most exciting thing to talk about, but they're hugely important.
Hugely important.
Obviously, everything that we agonize over, all the equipment choices and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start off with the stands. Now, let's talk about what you would need and why you would need it. So for me, I think let's start at, frankly, the most expensive stand that we would need. And the reason why I want to start with that is because for most people, especially if they're working with virtual instruments, there's one thing they're probably most likely to be recording outside of virtual instruments. And of course, that is a vocal. And the vocal microphone in any studio that I've ever been in is always the most expensive mic available. Now, don't get me wrong, SM7s are used and they're very popular and they're in the $400 range, $400-500, and people use 58s. But ultimately, when you go to any recording studio, there's usually a beautiful and expensive condenser microphone sitting on a stand. And even in a budget studio, it's still probably going to be your most expensive mic. So that means we need to buy something that can take the weight of a decent quality condenser and isn't going to fall over and destroy it. And and frankly, probably something that's really just as obvious is like, you don't want it to be on a cheap boom stand because you don't want to be sitting there watching the boom slowly moving down. And before you know it, it's 3 inches below the chin of the artist that's singing. So let's...
Yeah, exactly. And we've all run into that, right? So just the droop of the boom, that kind of thing, where you've placed the microphone, you get it exactly where you want to, and then it starts to droop, and you go out there and you find out that it's not pointed quite where you thought it was, or not pointed at the instrument at all. And there's there's stories of that happening, right? Where the I forget what it is. Was it Dire Straits, right? One of those legendary guitar tones where they had placed the microphone, the stand drooped and it was pointed at the floor, and it sounded amazing. And they went out and found that later after tracking everything. I think that's how that story went.
Yeah,
but
that's
usually it's not going to work out quite that well.
It's money for nothing. And I think it actually, if my memory serves me well, I think it was actually 2 microphones that were on the cab and both of them drooped. And they got that kind of slightly dark tone. And it's remarkable. Yes, that with the Les Paul just created a really unique guitar sound that I have tried many, many times to replicate. So, yeah.
And it worked, but it's not normally going to work like that. Also, going back to what you were just saying a minute ago, I thankfully over the years have put together a pretty nice mic locker for my room.
Yep.
And my U87, which actually I've only had for a couple of years, it has a big old dent in the front of it because I put it on a lesser stand without a real heavy bass. It still works fine. It works fine. It sounds great. I just kind of wish it didn't have the dent in it, and that's a lesson learned. I only use the heavier duty and heavier bass stands to hold up the heavier microphones and the higher end mics. So,
I mean, I could go on one of my famous tangents here and talk about, quite often that's where a U87 continually wins. There are lots of incredible microphones that come pretty close and maybe even surpass at a cheaper price, and we talk about them all the time. But one thing I've noticed with U87s is you go to recording studios that have had U87s since the late 60s, early 70s when they first came out, and they are dented to pieces, but you plug them in and they still sound brand spanking new. There is something about a U87 that really makes a statement in a recording studio. It's got the Neumann name, but it can take a beating, an absolute beating. All right. Sorry, we weren't here to talk about mics, but my tangents are famous. So let's go for stands. So obviously for a vocal mic, it's got to be a boom stand. I have recorded vocals on straight stands because that's all I had in a particular environment, but obviously a boom stand makes the most amount of sense. I've got here a boom stand that we just grabbed, which is the on-stage stands. Now, this is not a particularly heavy-duty stand, but it is one of our best multi-purpose stands. I was thinking about it, and I'm guessing I've had it for minimum 10, maybe 15 years. The studio that we've had at the house here has been here for 11 years, and we've had it since before that. So this is a utilitarian stand, but it's not necessarily, I would be happy to put like a lighter condenser, definitely 57s and other dynamics on it. But I think for a lead vocal, we should be looking at something with a lot more heavier duty. What is a sort of a value for money entry point for a heavy duty boom stand?
Sure. Yeah, we send out a ton of the on-stage stands, and they really are good stands. I have a bunch of them. I think if you take care of them, make sure to loosen the joints and everything as you fold or move the stands.
Yeah, I can demonstrate that as you said it. What Mike means is make sure you undo it completely before you try to adjust the stand. I've even watched people with years of experience just grab a stand and pull it up without adjusting it, and it will immediately destroy any extra purchase, any extra leverage that's created, and after a while that stand will be completely useless. So undo it, put it in the position that you want, get the angle that you want, and then tighten it back up. Do not move it when it's tightened. You will destroy the stand. Also, the second thing I always like to talk about is if you've got a double boom or even a single boom, make sure that you get as much weight on the back. Don't get yourself into a situation where you've got this. Because if you've got this with a mic on there, it doesn't matter pretty how light the mic is, it will end up drooping. So if you've got a double boom, what you can really get into is taking the second part of the double boom and pulling it as far back as possible so there's as much weight on the other side to counterbalance the microphone. I mean, it's a swing, think of a swing, you get a heavy child on one side and a light child on the other, what's going to happen? It's just going to do this. So think about it logically, and that will give you a lot better balance.
Yeah, exactly. And then we also, we do carry counterweights as well. So even for some of the lighter duty stands that don't come with counterweights built in, we can add a 3 and I think a 5-pound counterweight to it, and that's huge for being able to make sure that the mic doesn't droop, especially if you have to extend it far.
Where do I do that? If I put in boom stand counterweight, would it come up?
Yeah, let me find it here.
I didn't know about that. You think I would, wouldn't you? After all these years of doing this.
Yeah, so OnStage makes them. So the CW3 and the CW6. So they're 2.5 and 5.5 pounds. Yeah, I have a handful of these, and I'll use them when I'm trying to, honestly, when I'm trying to extend something a little further than I should with a stand over a drum kit or something along those lines. But yeah, just having that handy, and that just clamps onto pretty much any stand as long as it can fit around that.
That's brilliant. I didn't know about this.
The tube, I think up to 7/8 of an inch.
Okay, well, I didn't know anything about that. We didn't prepare anything on it. This is really, really quite cool. Yeah, I think even the $20 option here, the OnStage 2.5 pound at $20, to be honest, for those of you that are going to be watching this and thinking, well, I can't yet afford like $200 stands for my overheads, but I do have some, maybe some stands of this kind of quality, that might be the $20 option that saves you a $200 investment until you can afford it. That's really smart. Didn't know about that.
Or saves your microphone. Yeah, exactly.
Saves your microphone, yeah.
So those things are great to have, a handful of those.
Yeah.
So as far as the stands, yeah, I mean, the on-stage stands are good stands. They really are. If you take good care of them, they'll take good care of you. So
I see like an on-stage, I don't know if it's the same one as this, it's like $40, which is a great entry level. That's a Euro boom. The telescoping boom that's sitting here next to it is a K&M, which of course are incredible stands. K&M are fantastic stands. That's Konig and Mayer.
Definitely, and I have a handful of the K&M stands myself. Also, Atlas makes good stands with heavier bases like that. The K&M stand is built very well. It's going to be a little bit, the actual base is a little bit heavier, even in their tripod stands. So,
yeah.
wish that I had had my 87 sitting on a K&M stand that day that it toppled. But any stand, if you extend a tripod stand out, I'll always try to have the boom. Ideally, you can't always do this, but ideally, I have it extended out over one of the legs, so it has a little bit of leverage there, making sure that it's not going to topple.
Yeah. So there's a company I do want to talk about because I got very excited by the quality of their stands. Triad Orbit. They are not cheap.
Yes.
At all, but I felt like that was the first time, and don't get me wrong, Koenig & Mayer, K&M, amazing stands, and every studio I've been in, you always feel secure when you see the K&M stands. But the Triad Orbit stuff is built like a proverbial brick you-know-what house. I'm really impressed by their stands, and I just felt like it was one of the first times I've seen any kind of innovation in something so boring as stands, but I felt like there was a lot of innovation in there. So definitely worth talking about, but not cheap.
No, so Triad makes great stands, and so not only are they heavy duty and heavier physically, but then they also have they have attachments for everything, from additional booms that are on ball joints to putting an iPad on your stand, an iPad mount. Really, really cool. With a little bit of planning there, you can use one stand. Honestly, their stuff or the Latch Lake Mic King system, it's a similar kind of thing where you have a billion different attachments and extra booms and these kind of things that you can add to the main stand, and you can mic up if you want to. You can have one stand going up the side of a kit, for example, hold your overhead microphone, your snare top, your snare bottom, a hi-hat mic. You can do this all with one stand. Definitely not inexpensive, but amazing what they've engineered.
Yeah, although it looks like, I mean, this is not cheap, but it does look like they've got some stuff. They've got there's a tripod mic stand, which is not a boom, but it's $239.99, 240. Let's have a quick look, see where they've got everything, but it is built to last.
Absolutely.
I like the one on casters here, but you can buy the boom separately, can't you, and add it?
Sure. You can add the boom separately. You can add all these different attachments separately, and again, they'll have these ball joint splitter adapters where you can put a couple of things into the base of one stand. So yeah, there's a lot you can do.
So I feel like
stands.
What we're sort of outlining here is buy the best possible boom stand you can get. If you're on the slightly cheaper side, which is totally understandable, I started off with inexpensive stands. If you are going to come in under the entry level and you do have a relatively heavy condenser microphone for a vocal mic, which is probably most sort of over $400, $500, $600 microphones start to have some weight to them. You might just be better off buying something entry level, something, like the onstage stand, and then get that counterweight, just so you can balance. I mean, it's not going to be probably as a safe feeling as spending a fortune on a really, really expensive stand, but it's definitely a smart way of going. Yeah, I like this. So,
and as you're looking at those stands, also, you were talking about extending the boom out to give it a little bit more weight. I still would point out the difference though between the fixed boom where you have to extend it out, versus the telescoping boom where it can telescope into itself. Because when you're miking up, whether it's miking up a whole kit or whether it's just a small booth and you're trying to mic up a vocal, you don't want to have to position the mic a certain place because your boom is too long. So either one of those, of course, can extend further out if you need it to, and you can add the counterweight to it. But being able to have the option or not of having it extend out the back is a nice thing. The telescoping boom costs a little bit more, of course, but it just makes sense to have. And all of these manufacturers, of course, are going to offer the option of a telescoping boom.
Yeah, I'm not trying to play favorites here on any of the mic stands, but in the price range, for instance, you've got the onstage telescoping Euro boom mic stand at $60. I feel like I would be safe to recommend to somebody if they've got a budget and they're really watching the pennies on this. Something like that at $60, but with the counterweight, I would feel pretty secure for a vocal mic of a decent-ish. It's just tough. I feel like if you've got a microphone that's $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, then spending a few $100s on a mic stand is a smart thing to do. it's not worth the risk. It's like, oh, I saved myself, $100 buying this cheaper stand, but it fell over and, destroyed my $2,000 microphone. But if you're in the sort of sub $1,000, $500 price range, then of course, your budget's pointing towards maybe getting a cheaper stand with the counterweight would make a lot of sense for a vocal mic. So I think this is one of those situations where common sense will prevail. Don't have a $5,000 microphone on a, $30 mic stand and then be surprised when it falls over and gets destroyed, But then, yeah, just use common sense on this. But I do really like the OnStage, and it's interesting that we've had this stand for so long. It's probably never had a mic on it, or if it has, it's probably like a 57. But this has been something we've used on drum kits. It just came from the living room there where it had been used on a piano. So we have used it on piano mics. So, I can definitely speak to that kind of budget. So to reiterate, $60 with a counterweight is probably something I'd recommend. I didn't know about the counterweight, so thanks for that, Mike. And then, of course, if you want longevity, although, to be honest, again, had this for a long time, you're never really going to lose with K&M. They're built really, really, really well. And and then the Triad Orbit for the permanence, for something that's going to last you a lifetime and is going to be very, very flexible. But it does seem like budget is really, it's balancing budget with common sense.
I would say so. And yeah, just taking the care like we talked about with if the stand isn't quite as heavy duty, to make sure that you're taking care of it. And then also when the boom is extended, that it's over the foot, over one of the legs of the tripod. But yeah, absolutely. None of these stands we talked about are bad stands.
No.
They've taken care of the last for you for a very long time.
Yeah, and I can attest to it. We've had this stand for absolutely ages, and it works great. Okay, so as far as like straight stands, I actually don't have much use for them these days. I was thinking about this before the call, and I was thinking to myself, we do have some straight stands, but there's not a lot of instances that I'll need them, because if I'm doing a vocal, I need to get the vocalist away from the stand. I don't want them kicking the stand. So I'm not going to put it on a straight stand. If I'm recording a guitar amp, it's possible a microphone could go on one if it had a very small bass and could get tight to the amp. But typically, I'm using a short stand with a short little boom on it. And then I thought to myself, well, there's kick drums. No, that's a boom stand to get inside. Maybe I could use a short straight stand for an outside kick drum mic. But it's always nice to have a boom.
The boom is going to give you the best positioning options. So whether we're talking about just trying to maybe not make a performer feel quite as claustrophobic or whatever the word would be, just because you have that stand in the way, both for the recording because they might bump it, but also it just feels better to not have it. Yeah, you still have the mic possibly in your face, but to not have the stand right up in there. But yeah, being able to, if you're using multiple kick drum mics and you're also using a sub kick or something like that, and you have all these other stands around the kit, you're definitely going to want a boom of some sort to facilitate the placement of the mics.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a cheat sheet that you can download below, everybody, which will have suggestions for what you would need on a drum kit, what you would need on pianos, and a lot of it's interchangeable. And it really just comes down to, are you going to be recording bands live? And secondly, do you have permanence of setup? Think about these things when you're thinking about ordering mic stands. Now, obviously, if you call somebody like Mike, he's going to have this same conversation with you and get to understand how you're recording. But if you're sitting here on your own and you want to make some notes, think about this. You've got a band, maybe it's in your garage. Is it going to be a permanent setup? Is it something you do, only on weekends? You pull the car out into the driveway and you get it. That's one thing. But if you've got a permanent setup, which I do, you'll have to buy more stands, but it will save you hours and hours of breaking down and resetting up. So for most people, for instance, maybe one kick drum mic inside, maybe a snare top, maybe a hi-hat, pair of overheads, tom mics on the top. But you might go a little bit further than that. Now you might have, if you've got more inputs than 8, you might want to go kick inside, kick outside. That's already 2. Snare top, snare bottom. That's 4. 5 for the hi-hat. 6, 7 for 2 toms, Maybe they have more toms. Maybe you want to double mic the toms underneath. So now suddenly you've got 2 more just for that. Pair of overheads, maybe the garage or whatever room you've available has some nice ambience going on. So maybe you want to mic mono or possibly stereo rooms. What you'll need to do is calculate how many mic stands you'll need based on how you're going to mic a drum kit. And the second thing to think about was like, well, if you have a big enough live room, you might want to track a band live together. So if that's happening and suddenly you've got a guitar amp mic, bass amp mic, lead singer microphone. So all of these are going to need stands. What I would do is I would take a worst case scenario for a potential band recording and then figure out how many stands you would need. And you've got to figure out, is it going to be a permanent setup? If so, that will help you with the calculation. And you can go in thinking about where you want to spend the money. And if you're going to spend the money, typically it's the condenser microphones. If you've got a piano, you're going to be thinking, are you recording in mono or stereo? That's actually quite a big deal because boom stands tend to need the longest reach over a piano. So typically with pianos, I always will throw a high quality boom stand. We're talking now like a grand piano or a mini grand. So high quality stands for your piano, high quality stand for your vocal, and high quality stands for your overheads. You could probably get away, and this maybe is a situation where you could get away with straight stands, is room mics, because they're not overhanging anything, but a decent quality straight stand on for a pair of room mics is probably quite usable. But in most situations, unfortunately, the reality is you're probably going to need boom stands. So it's just balancing out quality of stand with the quality of the microphone that's going on it, and then whether you're going to be recording a band live or not. And most importantly, is there a permanence of setup? If it's not a permanent setup and you're just recording drums on their own and then breaking down, those overhead stands will be a pair of high quality stands. It could also be the pair of high quality stands that you use on a stereo miking of a piano. They can also be one of them that can be used on the vocal mic. So it's really understanding your setup. And once you've understand that, you can get there and calculate how many stands you need of what quality. Again, we'll have a cheat sheet down here giving you suggestions of what you might need for stands. And again, balance your budget based on the quality of the microphones. You know, it doesn't make sense to put a $3,500 microphone on a $40 stand. As much as you want to save some money, it's not worth the repair cost. Once that gets dented or something happens to it, God forbid, on the capsule, top of my head, I don't know what it's going to cost, but $1,000 repair on a $3,500 microphone really does justify a $200 plus stand, doesn't it? So, Mike, I think the only other thing that we're not going to be able to cover here, at least in my experience, is probably the things that you get asked for all the time, like podcasting stuff, like desktop boom stands. Can you take me through some of those? Because a lot of people obviously are doing YouTube videos, are doing TikTok videos, are doing podcasting. What kind of stuff are you getting asked for that?
Sure. Yeah, so you're going to have everything from little 7-inch round base stands that'll just stand on the desk. There are a few of those that are easily positionable, like actually on stage makes their little adjustable desktop stand that works really well and is low profile, all the way to some of the kind of radio station looking scissor stands, the arms that we're used to seeing in radio or podcast studios. When looking at those, I would take a look at whether or not they have the cable included, what the adapter size is, whether it's 5/8 or whether it's the Euro size, I think 3/8 of an inch. And of course, there's adapters available for that, so it's not a big deal, but we try to make sure we get the adapter in there if it doesn't have one, so that when you actually get it, you can use it right out of the box. And we have a bunch of packages put together too when people are looking for the podcast end of things, when they're looking at.
I bought one from you. Actually, now I think about it, I bought one from you about maybe 5 years ago. Oh, here it is. Yeah, this is what I got for you. It was called, I think it was the Yeti Caster, Professional Broadcast Bundle. I think that's what it was. I think I got that from you, the Yeti Caster. So that comes a mic and a stand all in one.
Yeah, so you're going to have those kind of options. We have bundles for people are looking for like an SM7, for example, with one of those scissor arm stands. We have those all put together on our site. We try to have those bundles together so people can kind of build from that. And we're not restricted to those bundles. We can always modify them, but it's a good way to see kind of what the combination of mic and arm will cost. Some of them support more weight than others, so we'll take into consideration what microphone we're actually putting on it, of course, when we're sending it out, or we try to, so that it'll work for you when you get it. But aside from that, yeah, it's just the functionality and the look that you're after. Some people just need a stand on the desk right in front of them, and some need it to stay out of the way and be a more like the boom arms, or the more like the scissor stand kind of option.
When Mike and I worked together at Swing House, my old studio, we had a live room, which was also a rehearsal room. You remember those? So, a lot of the times, Mike, we were tracking in there, but those stands got a lot of abuse. Like a lot, because we'd be tracking and we'd be setting up for a few days and tracking drums and making a record. But when we weren't in there making a record, there'd be people in there, doing rehearsals using our same stands. And when you've got bands in there in a rehearsal, it's like a rental car, isn't it? They don't really care how they treat the equipment, And I'm guilty of it. We all are that have been in bands. And I want to give a shout out to the Atlas stands, because we did have a lot of the Atlas stands for the overheads that would also become piano mics, that would also be pretty much everything. And I do remember the big round bass, heavy duty Atlas stands we had. So that would be a good conversation. Can you talk us through the pros and cons of like the round basses versus, like a 3-leg, a tripod stand? And then, of course, locking stands like that Triad Orbit do. And, of course, Ultimate, another great company, that has the locking wheel stands. Give us a kind of your opinion on that based on your customer experience.
Round base stands will have a little bit of weight built in. Even the latest ones have usually a little more weight to them than the latest duty tripod stands. So that's worth pointing out. But they're not usually going to have quite as much of a diameter. They're not going to take up as much space. They're not going to have as much leverage against falling over. That said, things like some of those Atlas stands, extremely heavy base, but then they're also a little bit larger, those tripod bases. So that kind of splits the difference between what a tripod is and a round base stand. That said, you do have some tripod stands like the K&M ones and some others that are physically heavier. And I find that the tripod stands, it's still a challenge sometimes, as trying to mic up a drum kit and get all the tripod bass mic stands in there along with the tripod bass drum hardware and all that kind of stuff. But I find that that's going to be still a little easier to put the puzzle together and find places for all those feet and legs, as opposed to a bunch of round bass stands. So I would think that those are kind of the advantages there. As far as locking wheels, having the casters on there, when you have the taller stands with heavier bases, longer booms. I have a set of the onstage tall mic stands with the real long booms, and I use those for my overheads, and having the casters on there is huge for being able to move them around the room, around the live room. But yeah, you need to have the casters locking. You need to, once you get them in place, you press the lockdown and they should then stay in place. Atlas makes amazing heavy duty overhead stands like the ones I think we had at Swing House. Those things are not going to move once you get them in place. So I love those stands as well.
Yeah, I just thinking about it, because when I first started at Swing House, I think it was 99 or 2000. And we had 3 or 4 Atlas stands that were in rehearsal rooms that were also doubling up for live, because that was always our big main rehearsal rooms, were also our tracking rooms. And I swear blind that those same Atlas stands were the same ones I used right up until I got out of that studio. I mean, so we're talking at least 12 years of personal abuse that I knew of, and those stands still lasted. I think there's definitely something to be said for spending enough money on a stand, while at the same time knowing that if you have got a slightly less expensive, and again I'm holding up an unstage stand, it's just treating them well is probably a bigger deal than anything else. But but you can't police it. If you've got a personal studio, you can police it. But if you've got to a situation where, for those of you that have commercial studios or are looking to turn your home studio, maybe in your garage, to a commercial facility where you may not always be the main engineer or producer in there, think about that as well. That's why we had that sort of sideline conversation about U87s, about one of the blessings of a quality microphone like that is, yes, it has the Neumann name, so it's good to have on your website and people take you seriously. It just does. But actually, the main reason why studios like those microphones is A, they sounded good, and B, they last forever. So again, we're coming back to the budget thing. If you're going to be somewhat commercial and you're going to have different engineers and assistants coming in, then that extra $100 on the mic stand could save you a lot of heartache. If you're in the middle of a session and you have to rush down to your local store to pick up a stand and take a couple of hours out of a session, if you're charging $50 an hour and you're gone for 2 hours, there you go. There was your extra $100 on the stand. So it's always going to be a balance of quality and budget. It's great that we've had this experience together, that we've both used these stands and know what we're talking about. And it's interesting that I didn't think of Atlas immediately because they were just kind of an old reliable.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I remember acquisitions while we were at the studio together there. But you're right. I don't remember ever having a new stand come in, and you are also. That's a good point. I wasn't there generally when that room was being used as a rehearsal room. That live room was also used as a rehearsal room. We may have been in the building, but we weren't in there. We have no idea what happened to those stands when we weren't looking. But yeah, I don't remember any of those stands ever being replaced, and they held up.
Yeah. There's definitely I think good utilitarian stands. And then of course there's Gator, which is in a similar price range to on stage as well, maybe just slightly more expensive. What's your experience with them?
Yeah, so Gator makes good stands. They have that quarter turn clutch on their stands for raising and lowering the level of the stand. I had really good luck with those overall as well. And same deal, if you take good care of those stands and pay attention to them, they're going to last you for a very, very long time as well. Yeah,
here's something that screams out to me on the short stand. Compa bass drum and amp mic stand, Gator, $40. I like this bass where it's like a rectangle with a
little foot.
Yeah, like the weight is at the back, but there's length at the front. So that's smart. That looks like physics to me. I relate to that. And $40 for a kick drum, bass drum / guitar amp. Yeah, I mean, and most studios are going to need 4 of those. And if you're tracking, guitars, I got a guitar player and a bass player. That could also be the bottom snare mic as well. So
sure,
4 of those minimum.
Yeah, I have a handful of those. My short stands personally are a mixture of the Gator, the Onstage, and the K&M ones, and all those little short stands with the booms on them work very well. But I do really prefer, especially for my inside kick mic and sometimes for the guitar amp, but for the inside kick mic, to be able to get it in there. Mm-hmm. To really be able to place it properly. The shaft of the stand really should be as close to the kick outside as possible, and having that small, heavy little foot is really useful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that does kind of shout at me as being a smart choice. $40. It makes perfect sense. I know what it's like when you're miking a drum kit. If people are new to miking drum kits, the least amount of space that a stand can take up, the better. Because you're talking about drummers that, especially if they're new to the studio, they will set things up that are great for their playing, which is always what drummers do, but the seasoned guys and girls will come in and know how to place everything to allow engineers to get in there and get mics. They've been beaten up, you get like a Victor and Drizzer or a Blair Sinter to come in, they'll set up their kit and it's easy to mic because they've had, producers and engineers tell them, oh, you need to raise your cymbals, for instance, because I need to get my tom mics in there. And also I don't want the cymbals to bleed into my tom mics. So you need to put your cymbals higher. But a younger drummer or an inexperienced drummer will like the cymbals to be really close to the toms. which means A, it's really, really difficult to mic a tom because now there's a cymbal right in the way of it, number one. And number two, it's really difficult to mix it because every tom here has a cymbal inside of it. So, and that for many of you setting up home studios is going to be a big issue because you're going to have less experienced musicians coming in to record. So footprint is the word I was looking for, Mike. So microphone stands that take up a very small footprint, meaning telescopic boom stands, smaller basses are really, really, I can't say really enough, really important when miking drum kits.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything we do as engineers is about capturing the performance and making a musician comfortable and all that kind of stuff. Exactly. It sure is nice when you can get in there and put the mic where it needs to be without compromising that or without having to. We all do in some cases have to ask for things to be moved slightly to fit microphones in, but it sure is nice when you actually have that space.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to get into philosophy of production, yes, if you've got a young new band coming in, you're not going to get a great performance out of a drummer if you completely shake their world to its core. If you come in and go, no, you have to raise your cymbals up a foot and you need to use this and that and change that out and stuff. This poor young drummer who may have never, ever been in a studio is now completely intimidated, is playing super timidly, is now having to like reach higher for their cymbals. So yes, it's you do want the best sound, but not at the compromise of performance and ideas and creativity. And you're going to kill the creativity in a session if you're like dictating to the musicians, telling them they're wrong. It's always about compromise. So yes, I think telescopic, small footprint on mic stands, particularly for drums, is very, very important. Mike, you rock. Thanks, everybody. There will be a cheat sheet down here, so please download that. Also, of course, leave some comments and questions below and tell us your experiences. We really want to know what your experiences have been. This has been a fascinating journey and would love to know how your particular home studio build is either going or has gone. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mike. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, ciao, goodbye.